Four Historic Temples, Part 1b, Historical Events, and Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphnath-Paneah, which means revealer of hidden things, among other meanings. Genesis 41, verse 45. This is a view of the Hinnom Valley from north of the elbow looking south. The top of the wall is now a part of a roadway. That wall was in occupation during the 1800s when this photograph was made, because you can see it's camels and burros and so forth using it. No automobiles. This is a modern picture of the same wall from a little bit higher up. You can see the automobiles, and it's taken during the late 1980s. So you can see the cars and so forth coming down the street, highway now, and driving across the top of the wall. That wall you've been looking at appears to be part of the Suburbs wall surrounding the Solomonic Temple. It also appears to relate to the Second Temple, the Levitical City wall of the Second Temple. So we'll show a little bit more of this in a moment. This is a map of the Solomonic Temple and Levitical City of pre-Babylonian Jerusalem imposed. Now, the wall you just looked at is right there. And we have two photographs now, one looking south where the blue arrow shows, and the other looking at the temple area, the little blue arrow. This is a photograph of the blue arrow, the large blue arrow, showing the north-south, the south end of the north-south portion of the Hinnom Valley. You can see where the Hinnom Bridge is down to the left. This photograph is the next one to the north of the last photograph. It points out the Solomonic Temple is buried here, and the buildings are all built atop the Solomonic Temple today. Jeremiah 30, verse 18. The Solomonic Temple is buried west of the Hinnom Valley. 1. The Solomonic Temple is west of the Hinnom Valley. Jeremiah 19:2, King James Version. 2. The mountain that lieth before the valley of Hinnom, westward. Joshua 15:8. 3. Her gates, Jebus Jerusalem, are sunk into the ground. They are buried, covered with earth. Lamentations 2:9. The modern city. 4. The city shall be builded upon her own heap, little hill, and the palace shall remain after the manner thereof. The inner temple shall be well preserved. Jeremiah 30, verse 18. 5. References to Herod's temple also apply to the earlier temples. Quote, there shall not be one stone left upon another that shall not be thrown down, i.e., all will be buried. Luke, Matthew, and Mark. Promises come true. 6. God hallowed Solomon's temple, but warned that if people did not obey, he would remove it from his sight. Subsequently, he buried it, so when people disobey, no amount of inducements can cause it to be uncovered. Yet people can re-enter the buried temple via either the Sweetwater Tunnel or sewer line. 1 Kings 9, 6-9, or verses 1 through 9. Hezekiah's rocks. King Hezekiah, using great stones, covered and concealed the Solomonic Temple's water source, the spring inside the suburbs. When Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came from Nineveh to sack and plunder Jerusalem and the Solomonic Temple. Sennacherib partially covered the city and temple walls with earth using slave labor from nearby towns. Now let's look at re-entering Solomon's temple. But first, when Sennacherib was covering the city and temple, Sennacherib probably partially excavated the Ben Hinnom Valley. Today, when Hezekiah's rocks are removed, people can easily re-enter the Solomonic Temple via the temple's freshwater tunnel. Now let's examine the ancient Jebus Jerusalem, where the throne of Saul, David, and Solomon existed. Her gates are sunk into the ground. They are buried. Lamentations 2:9, King James Version. The essential utilities, Solomonic Temple and Holy City, water sewer systems. This is pre-Babylonian Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem, formerly called Jebus. The Mediterranean Sea is on the west, the plain of the Philistines, and then the Shephelah, surrounded by great cliffs. All right, the home of God's Holy Ark for 400 years, about 400 years, was the Solomonic Temple in the Levitical City. So when Sennacherib was approaching, Hezekiah covered access to the springs. So you can see where the water came from in the Ayalon River water source. It was expelled from under the Levitical City in the temple sewer outflow into the Hinnom Valley. And that water is being pumped into the city water supply today. Now the Sorek River water source was the source of water for the pre-Babylonian city of Jerusalem, formerly Jebus. And the city sewer outflow is the Elah River. It flows on down into the Lachish River, which comes from Hebron and is probably Hebron's sewer source. So, and go forth into the valley of the son of Hinnom, which is by the entry of the east gate, and proclaim there the words that I shall tell thee. Jeremiah 19:2, King James Version. So the east gate opened out onto the valley of Ben Hinnom. Now let's consider Darius the temple builder. Back in the early 1980s, communications to Jewish authorities, beginning with Prime Minister Menachem Begin, notified them that the temple design criteria had been assembled. Begin's personal assistant, Miss Yona Klimavitsky, acknowledged receipt of communications. See PM's file 12981. Who is the builder? Menachem Begin and subsequent prime ministers showed no interest, yet bloodshed continued using the phony mount atop Hadrian's temple site to justify actions. Therefore, considering the origins of Jewry via Solomon and such disinterest by Jewish authorities, it appears that someone other than Jewry will be the principal temple builder. 1948, the Jewish state was founded. At that time, the Jewish nation was given the Solomonic Temple area. Later, in 1967, they acquired dominion over the preserved inner temples of both Zerubbabel's and Herod's temples. Remember, Jeremiah's 70 years began in 1918 through 1988, and Daniel's 70 years began in 1948 through 2018. So amazing events are about to unfold.